Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our session From Storytelling to Sales, Content Marketing That Converts. My name is Daniel Anzueto, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's session. If this is your first time attending one of our workshops, let me provide some context on Startout. Startout accelerates the growth of the LGBTQ+ community to drive our economic empowerment, building a world where every LGBTQ+ entrepreneur has equal access to lead, succeed, and shape the workforce of the future. I'm grateful today to be joined by Camille Galles, as the founder of Quintet Creative, a content marketing agency that supports purpose-driven companies with strategic social media, email, videos, and other digital content. Her background in political organizing, food service, and sociology gives her a unique perspective to help early-stage startups make an impact with digital marketing. A graduate of the University of Minnesota and Northwestern University, she's currently based in Washington, D.C. The floor is yours, Camille.
Thank you. I'm muted. Good. Thank you so much, Danny. Okay, show of virtual hands or hands in the chat. Who here has spent hours working on a piece of content only to post it and watch it flop? I know I have. Anybody? Yes, I'm seeing some hands being raised. Or who here has finally set aside time to work on something, opened up their computer, and just had a totally mind as blank as your screen, no idea what to write? Other hands? Yes, yes, me too. That's happened to all of us. Well, you are in the right place. Content marketing can feel intimidating, but we're going to break down today a formula that you can apply across any platforms, any sector, any type of company, so you can create content that doesn't just suck your resources, but actually drives your revenue. So let's get started. So here's a little roadmap of where we're going. So in this intro time, I want to remind you to just grab a notebook and a pen or something to jot down things. We're going to have some work time so you can apply what we're talking about immediately to your marketing challenges. But today we're going to go through my content marketing formula. We're going to talk about how content plays a role in the sales process. And then we're going to break down how to figure out what to talk about, how and where to talk about it to achieve your goals. We'll talk about evaluating success, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask me anything. So Danny already gave a great introduction, but this is me. I'm the founder and principal of Quintet Creative. This is my LinkedIn right here, so please scan the screen. I'd love to connect with you. And yeah, as Danny mentioned, I'm a former barista, grassroots political organizer, and also a musician. You can see me over here, 19-year-old Camille, playing oboe in a quintet. That's where I got my business name. I'm also on a queer swim team in the DC area, so it's really an honor to be here with the startup community. So thank you so much for having me. Okay, so we're going to start with the basics. What is content marketing? And I'm just going to read this word for word because I think it's such a great definition. Content marketing is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience, and ultimately to drive profitable customer action. So I love this definition for a couple parts. First, consistent. That's a real key of what we're doing here is we're not creating strategies that will go viral or that you're not going to be able to, you or your team isn't going to be able to maintain over time. Clearly defined audience, that's also something we're going to dive into. And then finally, this last part, ultimately to drive profitable customer action. That's what this all really comes down to. If it's not helping you increase your revenue, it's probably not worth it. And we're not posting just to post. We're not creating content just because it's fun, although it might be. We're always doing it with that business lens in mind. So that's what makes content marketing a little different than just, posting as yourself or what other creators might do. Some other important features of what we're going to talk about today is we're mostly going to focus on organic content versus content you can purchase on ad platforms. Content marketing also usually involves multiple touch points, so multiple different types of platforms and surfaces. And then, as I mentioned, it supports business goals and KPIs. So that includes things like social media, email content, video content, web content. We're going to talk about all of those different platforms and how to figure out which ones work for you. So why do content marketing? So you might think, well, how about if I just pump a bunch of money into Facebook ads? I'm going to acquire customers that way. Well, I don't know about you, but I've never learned to trust a brand just from seeing an ad in my feed. So we do content marketing because we build this community, not only acquiring new customers, but keeping them around so they become your brand's biggest fans and keep bringing people into what you're building. Content marketing also helps you build expertise and thought leadership. So really planting your flag in the ground for what you or your brand is about and what makes you different from everybody else. Again, this differentiate yourself. Anybody can run a Facebook ad, anybody can have that data to plug it in, but we're really using content marketing to set you apart. This storytelling aspect also helps you stay top of mind. So while it's not like an ad where you might click and buy right then, when it comes to the point where your audience is looking to buy what you're selling, you're going to be top of mind because these stories that you'll be telling them. And finally, this is about nurturing clients and then retaining them, like I mentioned. Not just, this is especially important if you're selling things at a higher price point or require a bigger commitment. So bringing people into your world and eventually making it irresistible for them to buy. Content marketing all plays a role in that. So this is my content marketing formula. And don't worry, we're going to break down every single piece of this. So whether you're writing a blog, making a TikTok, recording a YouTube video, writing a caption, all of these pieces play a role. It starts with understanding what to talk about and how to talk about it. Once you have that, you apply the best practices of whatever platform you're working with. For example, a video film for TikTok probably isn't going to be the best fit for YouTube. Then we're going to apply it to the goal. Then you get the successful piece of content marketing. So here's where the strategy comes in, because you're going to have this foundation built so it makes it easier to understand what to post and why you're posting it. And then the most successful content marketing pieces are going to have all of these components. All right. Okay, so let's start with the first and arguably the most important, defining goals. Let me scoot the zoom up. Okay. So I hope that most of you are aware of this image on the right here, the sales funnel. So typically when folks are considering buying, they're first in a stage of awareness, then considering, then taking action. And then we as content marketers, our job is to create content that will reach folks and move them down the funnel at every stage. So right now we're going to kind of break down how content can work in each of these stages of the sales process. So the first is awareness content. The customer sentiment that you really want to hit with awareness content is to get them to say, oh, I've heard of that company. They do X, Y, Z. They know what you do. They know what you are. They know what you stand for. So for content in the awareness stage, I typically like to think of it as doing having one of these three jobs. Either to entertain. For example, if you sell jewelry or clothing, you would want to create content that maybe might make somebody think, wow, that's so beautiful, I need one of those. Or maybe that's relatable and it makes me laugh. They're being aware of the problem and what you're solving for. Content that empathizes is also very effective when you're targeting customers in the awareness stage, wanting them to feel like, I feel just like that too, or I have that exact problem. And then finally, education. This company sells X, Y, Z. So when we're creating content for awareness, these are usually the goals that are associated with that stage. Moving down to consideration content. So this is where you want folks to be thinking, okay, maybe I'll engage with this company when I need X, Y, Z, or I'm facing the problem that they solve. So typically goals that align with consideration are content that inspires. So I want to live like that or experience that too. I want that transformation to be possible for me. Educating, sharing opinion, and content that empowers is also very effective. So content that helps your target audience accomplish a goal, make a decision, or reinforce a belief that they already have. And then finally, content that's about connecting, which is helping people understand, I get the why behind this company and our values align. And finally, it comes down to action, right? This is where the magic happens and the purchase happens, when they reach out, when they click buy, when they come to your website. So This is content that straight up promotes. So your target audience should be thinking, I know how to buy and I'm going to do it. And then finally, content that connects as well. The purchase experience should be so great that they're going to want to tell their friends, write a review, and become your brand's advocates. So as I'm breaking down these stages, you might be thinking, well, Camille, that's great, but I have no idea how my brand really fits in there. Like, I don't know what type of content is going to be the best for each stage. Well, that's because your customers really define your goals. And this is probably the most important foundation of content marketing is it's always about meeting that ideal customer where they're at. And this goes beyond just kind of demographic information like I'm targeting women in their 30s who live in a major city. That's not really personal or specialized enough to create the content that's really gonna, move people through that funnel, that's going to connect with them, inspire them, empower them. So instead of just focusing on the demographic questions, here are the questions that I go through with my clients when we're building their strategy. The first one is what are their, and when I say they, I mean your target customer. What are their fears, desires, and goals in relation to your brand or the problem that they solve? Like for me, for my business, it's what are my customers' fears, desires, and goals in relation to content marketing? You also want to think, what are they interested in? What do they do for fun? Where do they hang out online and in real life? It's also really helpful to understand what questions do they ask you, or what questions do you want them to be asking you? I also like to think, what are they struggling with before they're encountering your brand? So how can you create content that might help them solve that problem or illustrate to them where the solution is? And then understanding what is possible for them after encountering your brand. So what's that transformation that they go through? How are they going to feel when they've encountered your product or worked with you? So this is where that pen and paper comes in handy. We're going to have work time. So we're going to take 3 minutes right now. And even if it's not perfect, even if you just have to jot down a couple things, take a few minutes, take 3 minutes, in fact, to answer these questions for your brand. So I'm going to set a timer here and put on some background ambient music for my Spotify. So I'll bring you back together when 3 minutes is up. And feel free to pop questions in the chat as we're going on. Okay, the floor is now yours. Let's go. 3 minutes on the clock. Got about 30 seconds left. I changed it to 2 minutes. All right. So finish up that last sentence you were working on and keep your answers close by because this is going to inform all the other pieces of the strategy that we put together. It all comes back to serving your customers and really understanding who they are and what they want. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about goals and understanding what the goals of different types of content can be and how they might support your sales funnel and relate to your customer. Now we're going to talk about what to talk about. Maybe one of the biggest questions, right? So to understand what to talk about, I use a tool called content pillars. You might have also heard these described as content buckets, but content pillars are 3 to 5 topics that your brand consistently discusses, amplifies. Oops. There's my timer that I forgot to turn off. All right, so content pillars are topics your brands will discuss, amplify, and create content for. So content pillars are generative. You should be able to constantly dip into these topics for new ideas. So they're broad enough that you can generate lots of ideas from them. And of course, they should be related to your brand and your product. For example, if you are a luxury clothing company, talking about sports would probably not be a content pillar that would make sense for you. Content pillars are also used in all stages of the sales funnel and across all platforms. And they're also consistent, and that's consistency, not just for your benefit as a marketer or the CEO of your brand. It makes it much easier to deal with that blank page in front of you if you have topics already set that you know you're working on. It also makes your content consistent for your audience. They know what to expect from you. They start to associate you with these topics, and that's where we start to get that top of mind when they're facing problems that you solve. But content pillars are not the same as those goals we discussed. So having a pillar of education, unless maybe you're like a company for teachers or something, that's not a content pillar. That's the goal. So again, these are topics, not goals. Every topic you can apply different sorts of goals to. They also shouldn't be too specific. And we'll go into a little bit more how my process for content pillars. And they shouldn't be constantly changing. So the goal is, once a year at max, looking at these content pillars and figuring out what you're going to return to again and again and again. If they're constantly changing, you probably don't have a good handle on your target audience, or maybe need to get a little more organized internally. So let's break this down a little bit more. Typically, when I'm building content pillars, I like to set them up literally as pillars, these columns here, and I put the topic there. And I like to try and list out ideas for each topic just to kind of pressure test it and see if I can keep going. When you have content pillars that are really working for you, you should feel kind of like inspired and that you can constantly think of all these little ways and little nuggets and gems and tidbits that you can find within the topics. So let's look at an example. All right, these are content pillars for one of my former clients, Lunar Startups. Some of you may be familiar. That's actually how I got introduced to Start Out. But Lunar Startups is an accelerator that serves overlooked entrepreneurs in Minnesota. So it's a nonprofit program, and our target audience is reaching these lovely folks right down here, the entrepreneurs who participate in their program. So what content pillars do we use? First, we talked about alumni accomplishments. We had Lunar Brags every week we talked about. We hosted CEO chats where alumni could come and talk about what they learned and what they accomplished. We really did a lot of content introducing every new cohort when they came through that program. And when you think alumni accomplishments, that's so broad, right? You could talk about their personal accomplishments, their business accomplishments, their background, what they did before. So that's one pillar. The second pillar we called real talk. There's a lot of people are often very impressed when you say you're a small business owner, but as I'm sure many of you know, it's not really that glamorous, is it? So by offering real talk, we were able to really show that we understood what these entrepreneurs were facing. So we talked about self-care, the truth about scaling, recovering from failure. You could go on and on with all these kind of real talk about the founder experience. The next pillar was entrepreneur advice. So again, this is a broad topic that we can have lots of different angles within, such as how to get funded, when to hire, how to create a pitch deck, is venture capital right for you? How to fire somebody, how to how to build a marketing plan. You could just spin out so much from that. And then finally, we had a pillar that was just our programs. What is an accelerator? Introducing the team, how the program works. So this is an example for this nonprofit accelerator, but you can see how we're using these topics to kind of find all these little gems that we can use across our platforms. So how do you come up with content pillars? Well, it really starts with your audience needs and your audience feedback. That's why we did that exercise first, to really understand what they're interested in, what they have questions about, what you want them to have questions about. Your content pillars should be interesting to your audience. Also, your business goals and your expertise. If you have a goal of building awareness of a problem that people might not know they have, you might have slightly different content pillars than somebody who's maybe solving for a problem that is very obvious to people. And then, your expertise as well, as the founder, as the head of marketing, what you can talk about, what you could write a book about, or what your brand could write a book about, that's a good fit for a content pillar. It's also helpful to do keyword research. So to figure out, what people are searching for, even just if you don't have any fancy tools, just going into Google or Amazon and typing in some questions and topics and see what shows up as suggestions. That usually indicates that that's like a rich spot to create content around. I also love to look at competitors. Obviously, we don't want to copy them exactly, but you can see, how what they're targeting for content pillars, what they're talking about, and how you might talk about it differently, or you might be inspired to create a totally different topic. And then finally, if you are currently creating content, maybe on social or in your blog or something, look back and see what's doing well and see if you can connect the dots and identify topics that are really resonant and you can create more content around. All right, you guessed it. We're here for some more work time. So grab your notebook or your pen, and draw 4 columns. I will give you 3 full minutes for this, not 2 minutes, and try and brainstorm some content pillars. So see it for every topic. If you can get at least 3 ideas, that's going to be a good fit. And then if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we're going, and I'll respond. Okay, 3 minutes on the clock starts now. Okay, 1 minute left. See if you can generate some ideas, pick a new topic. right. Wrap up that last thing you were working on, because now that we've identified what you're going to talk about, we're going to talk about how to talk about it. And don't worry, you can always return back to your content pillars and refine them. We're just going through this at a high level, rapid, what we can fit into an hour. Okay, so how to talk about it. I use a tool called a brand prism to identify the perspective of the brands I'm creating content for. So it's a really helpful visual tool right here that kind of reflects all the different parts that goes into a brand. And this was invented in the 80s by some expert marketers. So let me break down each section of the brand prism. The first is physique. Sounds pretty obvious. It's the physical characteristics of your brand. Do you use bright colors, neutral colors, bold font, cursive font, and how does that communicate how you want to be perceived? The next section is the relationship. That's the engagement between your brand and your customers. How do they see you? Is your brand like a best friend? Is it like a mentor? Is it like a butler who helps? What is that relationship? How do they see you? And then reflection is, who is your ideal customer? It's great to be as specific as you can here. And that's where those questions that we answered about our ideal customers can really come in. If you can distill that down to a specific short phrase, you're in business. Over here, we have personality. So that's the voice of your brand and your human characteristics. Is it funny? Is it wise? Is it serious? Is it kind of sarcastic? Is it supportive, warm, caring? That's really important to know. And then also we've got culture. So this is what your brand believes, your origin story, or the why that you exist, where your values really come into place and what is going to create that strong connection between your target audience and your brand. And then finally, we've got self-image, how your ideal customer views themselves after engaging with your brand. This kind of goes back to that question we answered earlier. What's possible after your audience engages with your brand? That's what we want to identify here. Once we've got all that filled out, you can really understand how you're going to talk about the topics in a way that's going to be completely different and set you apart. If we go back to this lunar example, any accelerator could talk about entrepreneur advice or their alumni accomplishments, but the lunar brand and how we set ourselves up meant that we could talk about it in a way that, diverse, overlooked founders would feel drawn to our programs. So I have an example, because I know this can be a little bit, esoteric, hard to, a little tangible. Okay, so this is an example of one of my clients in the cybersecurity space. So probably the first thing you notice is Tony Stark, Iron Man, right there in the center. It's very helpful to me to think about a celebrity spokesperson who might represent the brand. So this could be somebody who's living, who's dead, a fictional character like Iron Man. And I think as we kind of break down all these elements of this particular brand, you'll understand why Iron Man is so compelling here. And this is really helpful too, because sometimes even with all of these kind of educational, smart ways of identifying the brand, it really is easier to say, okay, if Iron Man were writing this LinkedIn post, how would he say it? If Iron Man was publishing this blog, what would he say? Okay, so let's break this down. For our cybersecurity client, we had a physique that was confident, seamless, and secure, right? We really want to communicate that with our design, especially in cybersecurity, right? For the relationship, we wanted our ideal customers to see this client as a superhero that protects you against threats you didn't even realize were there, just like Tony Stark, right? And then the reflection of our ideal users were internet users who are already a little fed up with data and privacy solutions and looking for safe alternatives. So that's where you can see we got a little specific here. It's not just all internet users, it's users who are kind of fed up already and they know that there's problems in their current data and privacy solutions. Personality was very similar to Iron Man, confident, trustworthy, smart, and witty. And then we have culture. So for this client, it was, we all deserve the freedom of privacy. It makes the world a better place. You can see that kind of Avengers angle with that and why that Marvel superhero was such a good fit. And then self-image. So that's how customers experienced themselves or saw themselves after using this brand and this product, relieved and confident in their protection. Just like you might feel relieved and confident to know that the Avengers were out there protecting you from the bad guys you didn't even know were there. So how do you really kind of dig into this to find your brand point of view? So when you're looking at this prism and you're trying to figure out how to put these things into these short, snappy sentences, it helps to ask yourself, if you could wave a magic wand and choose a celebrity spokesperson, who would they be? It also helps to think about what might be some of your hot takes. So what are your philosophies when it comes to your customers getting the outcome or results they want? What things are non-negotiable when it comes to your customers getting the outcome or results they want? And what makes you different from your competitors or the status quo? And why would your customers care? Those things should all be reflected in your brand prism. Okay, and here we go. We're going to work on this together. So I'm going to set the timer again for 3 minutes, and I'll have this out here. So this is a 6 sides. That's a hexagon. Draw a hexagon, or even just, write these 6 items as columns on your sheet of paper, and see if you can start to put together this question and think about who might be in the center of your prism. So 3 minutes on the clock. I'll check out the chat. Here we go. All right, wrap it up. And we had a question in the chat. I'll just bring up for everybody here. Let me just present here. Okay, so JD asked, my trainings are for people managers, but the person who buys trains, usually HRDEI director, which do I focus on? The latter, or will focus on the people managers lead to it. So you're right, it's not always like just one person, or it can be, there can be lots of people who can lead people to buy from you. But I would focus primarily on the person who buys. You can think of those people who you're training as maybe your secondary audience, and think about how you can create, content that would serve them and also demonstrate your value to those people who buy. And especially as you get more confident creating content, you can kind of branch out a little bit, but I would focus on that primary person first, because ultimately we're talking about driving revenue, right? And so they're going to drive the revenue for you. Great question. Okay. So we've talked about goals, what to talk about, how to talk about it. Now, where to publish your content. Let's get into it. Okay, so choosing platforms, let me give you some advice here. The first thing is always quality over quantity. It's always better to be awesome on one platform than mediocre on several, always. So you don't need to stretch yourself too thin or overextend yourself, but focus on where you can really make the most impact, especially where your customers are hanging out. So understanding, for example, JD's example, I'm guessing his audience is probably on LinkedIn more than on TikTok. So it would make more sense for him probably to make content for LinkedIn versus TikTok, right? And then you also want to think about what's fun. We talked at the beginning about consistency. And if you're picking platforms that are stressful for you to create for, or you're just not very good at them, or you dread it, you're never going to post the content. And there is, it's hard to sit down and create content. Maybe we all dread it at sometimes, but if you hate going on video, why would you choose to make YouTube videos, right? Maybe writing would be better. If writing's really not your strong suit, choose video. So it comes a little bit with like what your team and what your capacity is, and thinking about where you can be consistent. So here's my 2 cents as a content marketer about which kind of platforms work well for the different stages of the sales funnel. So for awareness content, that typically tends to work well on social media for PR and SEO, that's search engine optimization driven content. That is really good fit for awareness. For content that you want to meet people in that consideration stage, blogs and web content, some social media as well. For example, like an Instagram reel is going to reach a bigger audience for awareness, but maybe an Instagram carousel is going to reach people who already follow you, who are considering. So, different platforms, different surfaces, and then email. And then for content to drive that action, it's going to be what's on your website, making it easy for them to buy, your emails, which are compelling, and reviews. Now, this is different for every person, so I'm not going to sit here and say you have to be on TikTok or you have to be posting on LinkedIn. It all really comes down to thinking about, again, you and your ideal customer and where they should go. So this is just my 2 cents. You also might be thinking, oh my gosh, you told me to just focus on a few things, but I have to create content for all of this and I'm limited time and I don't have all these resources like a major brand. That's where we go into repurposing content. So let me walk you through this. Let's say you're a clothing brand and you've put a lot of time and effort in launching your summer collection. And maybe you're writing a big blog post about it, or you're taking all these photos to put on your website. That is maybe going to be your content gold, your real central content that you put a lot of resources and time in. The key is for those big pieces of content, finding ways to repurpose it and take little pieces out and share them as much as possible. So for example, if we go back to the clothes example, maybe you have a TikTok of, the models just wearing the clothes to some aesthetic music and it's very beautiful. Then maybe you make another TikTok talking about, oh, well, these are the materials I chose for the clothes and this is why I use this color. Then you can duplicate that on Instagram Reels. Maybe one of them you can turn to an Instagram story and talk a little bit more behind the scenes. You could do an Instagram post with just the pants from your collection, then just the shoes from your collection. You could turn this into another blog post, maybe about the collaborators you worked with, the fabrics, writing a Twitter thread, and you could kind of X, Twitter, whatever it's called these days, and then different tweets about it. Maybe you're doing an event or doing more PR about this. You're doing Instagram Live where you're showing off the clothes. So, and you can see, okay, you're sharing links to your email newsletter and all these platforms. So this is really the key to working smarter, not harder as a marketer. It's thinking about how you can repurpose things as much as possible. And here's the dirty little secret. Nobody really remembers what you posted. Sometimes I even fall into this trap of thinking, oh my gosh, I have to say something new and something groundbreaking about this brand or this client every single time I'm writing content, but that's usually not true. You can talk about the same topic, maybe just it's a carousel instead of a reel this time, or you made a reel about it, so you're going to write a blog post about it. Different platforms are going to reach different people. People aren't thinking about your content as much as you are. And this is a way that you can ensure you stay consistent, you're hitting your content pillars, and you're getting the most bang from your buck. So how I like to organize my content is to build a content calendar. It's really hard to stay consistent and to post strategic content if every single week you're waking up like, what are we going to post this week? I like to plan a little bit in advance. So this, of course, varies again on your capacity and what kind of person you are. But typically monthly is when I'm looking at my content calendar and I'm thinking, okay, what are the content pillars I'm going to talk about each day? What platforms am I going to talk about? And what resources might I need to do that? So maybe I decide, okay, I'm going to make a reel about real talk for entrepreneurs on this Wednesday. So I need to make sure our CEO is ready and she records that in advance so I can edit it beforehand. Okay, I'm going to make sure she has the camera, things like that. So for monthly, it's not necessarily to plan, everything out, every caption, every image, every hashtag, but just so you have a general idea of where you're going, maybe 70% done. And then typically bi-weekly is when I prefer to film content. So not doing it every week, but that's also when you can write, design, publish, schedule. I also have it for weekly too. What I recommend for this is, kind of blocking your time. So let's just take the example of an Instagram reel. I would not advise filming the reel, editing the reel, writing the caption, and posting it all for the same reel on one day. I would instead think, okay, let me pick one day where I'm filming all the reels I need for this week. Then the next day, I'll edit them all. And the next day, I'll write all the captions for them. So that's not only more efficient for your brain, but it's going to help you kind of maximize your energy and really focus on that specific portion that you're working on. And then I always recommend that folks keep a running ideas log. This can be as simple as just the notes app in your phone, or maybe emailing things to yourself or sending stuff to yourself on Slack. But so then when it comes time to every month, when you're saying, okay, what's next for May or June, you have some ideas to get you going. And then it's always good to capture, event-based or time-sensitive content. It's okay to make things or post content that's not on the content calendar if you've kind of built that strategy and you're aware of how it fits in. Okay, now evaluating success. So we mentioned this at the beginning. If it doesn't drive revenue, it's not worth it. I also like to say business metrics are more important than vanity metrics. So what do I mean by vanity metrics? Those are things that look really impressive, but don't really contribute to your bottom line. For example, the number of followers you have, maybe even the number of views a video got. I've had clients where their videos have gone like super viral and you'd be like, oh, wow, what a success. But then it ends up trolls come in the comments, people are there just to argue. Maybe they're going to follow, but you can just tell from the profile they're bots or people who would never be interested in buying. I'd much rather have a reel that has fewer views and engagement, but actually leads to more sales. And then maybe you might even determine, well, these reels aren't helping at all with my bottom line, just for example. So also don't forget that content marketing is a long game. We talked about building relationships and consistency. So it's not going to always be, oh, you post and then here's an instant bump in your sales. You also want to set goals for your content that relate to your business KPIs. Again, we talked about like if you need to build awareness of a category, you're going to pick different goals than a business who is already in an established category. Setting goals for each step of the sales process. So, for example, a metric like views, which I mentioned, that could be a good metric for awareness of your brand, but it's probably not a great metric for whether they're actually taking action or really considering your brand. But commenting or sharing or saving content, that's a good indication that they're considering and engaging, right? So every part of that triangle, you can think of goals that would relate to each step. And then I like to look at my goals on a monthly basis for content. It can be really tempting to like get into the nitty gritty right after you post and seeing how well it does. But depending on the platforms, content has a different shelf life, and it's often hard when you're looking so granularly to really identify those trends. And the trends I'm talking about are things like what content pillar performs the best, which formats perform the best, which platforms perform the best. You know, Marketers like me will tell you, oh, here's a strategy, but the truth is, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't really know what's going to happen. So by staying kind of reactive and being willing to shift and meet your audience where you are, that's where your content marketing strategy is going to be the most successful. So think of it like a living, breathing thing you can keep tweaking and do more of what works, less of what doesn't. Okay. So we've come to the end. We have about 10 minutes left. It was really great sharing this with you all. I would love if you connected with me on LinkedIn. That's definitely a platform I use for my marketing, and I always like to build my community there. But now's your opportunity to ask me anything. So whether it's about, my work as my business or what we've talked about today, a specific challenge you're dealing with, feel free to, I believe it's okay if you come off mute to ask your questions or drop it in the chat.
Yes, please. Camille, thank you so much for such a fantastic session. If you have any questions, you're welcome to come off camera. You're welcome to ask it via audio or drop it in the chat. But thank you so much for taking us through that session today. It was fantastic.
Of course. You're welcome, Camille. How would you apply these techniques to a job search, says Leisha. So you are the person, like you're the product that's being marketed for a job search, right? So when you think of your target audience, you would think about the people who are hiring for the role that you want to apply for, right? Like what is going to be most important to them? What are they going to want you to demonstrate or to be able to solve for them? And then just think about you as the product demonstrating your expertise on those platforms and talking about those topics that are going to be top of mind. Like, for example, for marketing, if you're kind of looking for marketing roles at maybe a tech company, you might think, okay, marketing managers, they're probably thinking about AI. Maybe if I wrote something about, my approach to AI, that's going to kind of resonate with them. So yeah, you are the product in this situation. You are the brand. So you can apply all these tools just to you as yourself. And I just also want to say, like, it can be tough building your like professional brand. It doesn't have to be everything that's a part of you. It can be like what you want those people who hire you to see. So I hope that's helpful, and good luck on your job search. Okay, we've got a couple people with hands raised. I'm not sure if that's left over, if you have a question. Camille, did you have a question? Okay, maybe not. Alex, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm just curious because I've seen, classically, when it comes to a marketing plan, I know a lot of folks will suggest for you to position yourself as a thought leader
Mhm.
in a subject. Let's use an example for AI.
Mhm.
And so you mentioned in your presentation, if it's not generating revenue, don't do it. But what are
Mhm.
your thoughts on, let's say that I'm putting out content, whether they are articles or they are videos or they are short slideshows,
Yeah.
um, uh, positioning myself as a subject expert in the marketplace. While
Uh-huh.
that is not something that quickly generates revenue,
Yeah.
and positioning yourself as a thought leader and building that credibility and that trust with your market takes time and it's not instantaneous. So what are your thoughts on you know, using the strategy on positioning yourself as a thought leader, as an overall strategy for a business?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, I love how you said it's like kind of a long tail. It's not going to be like they read a blog post, they hit you up, right? But I think it's kind of, depending on what you're doing, it maybe sounds like maybe you're like a consultant or like maybe a service provider, thinking of a plan for yourself. And maybe I would evaluate that quarterly, like maybe not monthly. And I also like to look back and think about the leads that you did get. Where did they come from? And you can maybe see, okay, these were people who were referred to me. Well, do those people follow me on LinkedIn? Have they been seeing my LinkedIn posts? Or maybe you've done like a lot of work making TikToks and you're like, well, I haven't really increased my leads. Like that's not working. So I think that is a very effective technique. It's just a matter of, tracking what does come in and thinking about, like for me, for example, as a marketing service provider, a lot of that, how I get a lot of my business is because people say, oh, you need a social media person. I think Camille does that. You should call her. And I can't always like exactly track where it comes from, but that's why I post on LinkedIn so I can stay top of mind for my professional connections who are going to see me, remember what I do, and then they'll refer me. So it's not always like a one-to-one thing, if you're not doing like e-commerce or products or something like that. But I would say, track where your leads are coming, look at it over a longer period of time and experiment as you go. I hope that helped. Hunter, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes. Hi, Camille. That was
Hi.
awesome. So helpful. Um, so as a new founder, and I'm like defining what I'm doing,
Yeah.
there's the roadmap and then there's the MVP of like money now. And I'm
Yeah.
curious of your thoughts on how much to talk about the roadmap or just really zone in on this is what I'm offering today and you can do today with the tool
That's a
or the
good,
service.
that's a
Yeah.
good question. What's the vision versus, I mean, I would say it's almost like a both and I might think of
Hmm.
content pillars that relate to your vision. So like you're kind of talking about that space and like the innovations and like what you see. Then you're also talking about what you're doing right now about that. So you're still kind of bringing in the vision and you're still establishing yourself as the thought leader or that your product leader in that space. But you don't have to say, oh yeah, we can do AI chat if you can't, but maybe you can still offer like tips for working with AI chat. Should you use an AI chat? Like kind of planting those seeds. And that's
Mm.
actually where content can come in really helpful. Like, let's say, okay, I'm using this AI example, but okay,
Well,
I'm
it's
gonna,
great because it's partly my tool
okay,
anyway.
great.
So I think
So
we're all
like, I'm
using it.
gonna,
So it's on brand.
like, I'm gonna release this AI tool for marketers in 3 months. Okay, I know it's coming in three
Yeah.
months. What can I start creating about AI now that is going to start getting my audience ready for that and start seeing me as the go-to AI person? So then when you do say, hey, I've got this new tool that's ready, people aren't going to be like, what? Or just, you're going to be able to make sales more easily because they're already kind of coming into that funnel. I hope that makes
Hmm.
sense.
It does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I think we got a couple folks in the chat. All right, Maya, could you share a little bit more about your content planning approach? I'm a solopreneur. Yep, I hear you. I have a hard time setting aside time for all this. Thinking about hiring a virtual assistant to support me with this. I want to put in place some sort of system before bringing someone on board. Any advice? Yeah. I just wanted to say I emphasize with you, Maya, it's hard to make time when you're as a solo entrepreneur, and you're definitely not alone. I would say, unless you're hiring a virtual assistant who is a marketing specialist, which they're probably not if they're billing themselves as a virtual assistant, it would be really key to either work with a marketing specialist or try and set aside some time, like a mini retreat for yourself, 1, 2, 3 hours, a half day, where you can kind of build this plan in place. And then when you bring in your virtual assistant, they're more executing the strategy versus coming up with the strategy for you. Because you are going to know best for your brand, what's going to work and your capacity. And then as far as content planning approach, I would just say to start small, start consistent with what you can do. Like maybe it's just one LinkedIn post a week. Okay, start with that, right? And then once you kind of are able to build from there, then you can bring in a virtual assistant to kind of help you move those pieces, but definitely invest time on the front end for the strategy first. I hope that helps. And I will say, I use Notion as my content planning tool. People use all sorts of things, but that's the tech I recommend. Okay, Alicia says, speaking of AI, are there tools now that you know that can help with posting? ChatGPT can be great for brainstorming, but are there any automated tools for posting, for example, that are leveraging AI? You know, I'm fine for posting, especially if you're on the job search. I'm guessing you're probably posting on LinkedIn. Sometimes I think posting is actually easier if you do it manually, because like, let's say I want to tag people when I post on LinkedIn. Tools, I don't know of any tools that can really do that for you. And often for video tools, there's like the sound and the cover photo and the caption and the making sure it all lines up, and the tools just aren't really there yet. So I tend to do it manually. I'm not using AI to post. And then, you know, there'll be a lot of people sometimes wondering, like, what's the best time to post? When should I post? I would say, you know, start experimenting with that yourself. And when it works for you to post, it works. So sorry, I can't be too helpful with that, but that's my answer. Oh yeah, and we see we've got a consultant in the AI space, so hit that person up. Alex, great. Yeah, 100%. Most of the tools are very lacking with posting, yes. Okay, let me see. Metricool. Yeah, you know, everybody's got their own posting things they like. So you just kind of have to experiment. Okay, yeah, got a lot of great suggestions in the chat.
Fantastic.
Okay.
We are coming up to the end of our time. Thank you so much for the time you took to share this amazing content and answer the questions. If you wouldn't mind dropping your email or other ways that folks can contact you, we have your LinkedIn on the screen. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today as well for this session. I enjoyed it, hopefully as much as you all did, and Camille will be back with us soon enough. So thank you all so much. Please expect the recording in the next few days. And make sure to keep an eye on startout.org for future events. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.